welcome to the Second Service Podcast. I'm Matt, here with Joey. Joey, who are we speaking with today?
Today I'm really excited. We're talking to a gentleman who embodies the soul of our show, the Second Service Podcast. He served our nation in the Army. He went on to be the first Iraq War veteran elected to the U.S. Congress. Not only has he done all those wonderful things, but he was also one of our professors here at the MAPL program.
Yeah, very excited. Very excited.
All right, let's get into it. Hey, Patrick, and everyone. This is the Second Service Podcast. We're really excited to have Patrick Murphy on with us, not only because of the special connection being one of our professors in this program, and this being the culminating project that we're doing here before we finish up. We're just really thrilled to talk about your career as a whole, because when we thought of this idea of doing the podcast and calling it Second Service, honestly, we kind of had you in mind, because, you know, from the beginning of your career in the Army and just continuing to serve the people of the country, of your community, of your state, it's just been, for us, a symbol of that's exactly what this program is meant to do and meant to accomplish, to prepare people to kind of follow in those footsteps. And we've had some great conversations with some other folks that emulate what you've done in the path that you've set. So thank you for joining us today and being our guest on this program.
Well, Matt and Joey, I appreciate being part of the University of San Francisco family. It's been my honor to be part of it and to partner with people like Craig Newmark and so many others that are bringing to life, the possibility of our brother and sister veterans going in and their family members going into political public service and in different capacities. I mean, we joke that, there's 600,000 elected positions in America. There's 535 in the federal level, but how there's appointed positions, how there's community positions, how there's staff positions. So I'm a big proponent of serving your community, serving your country, in various ways, I come from, a family that's devoted to serving their country and their community. And I try to live by those examples of what the Bible puts out of, having a servant's heart. So I'm honored to be part of this today and to be with you and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to kick things off because we actually wouldn't be here today, and I wouldn't be in the program if not for your work on Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Because when I was looking to get in through the DCO program, through Direct Commissioned Officer into the Navy, I had to make a decision. Do I want to actually do this and live kind of my dream of being in the Navy, but have to not talk about my family and keep my family secret? Or do I just want to forego that? And thankfully, I was commissioned in 2013, and the incredible work that had been done helped to eliminate that barrier. And since joining, it's been an amazing experience for me and for my family. And I actually think most of my COs like my husband and my child more than they like me. So being embraced into the family, into the Navy has been wonderful. So I'm just curious, was there someone that you served with? What was the passion behind championing Don't Ask, Don't Tell as strongly as you did?
I had the opportunity to serve in the Army, since I was 19. And so when I was rising through the ranks, the Army eventually let me leave to go to law school, and I came back in. But when I was in the Army, I literally saw folks get thrown out just because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And people didn't understand at the time. They thought there was some type of misconduct. I'm like, no, if it was any mnemonic Sam, any statement, act, or marriage certificate, that would automatically trigger someone getting shafted out of the military. And at a time of war when our nation was attacked, we had thousands of innocent Americans be murdered on 9/11 back in 2001. And to know that we were in desperate need for young Americans to wear the cloth of our country and to, take the fight to our enemies, and to see that we were throwing out people just because of who they loved back at home, it was wrong. I taught about it when I was a professor at West Point. I used to teach constitutional law. I talked about, the courts are going to say go a little further than the military because of good order and discipline and military readiness, but it's still wrong. And it was really Congress that tied the military's hand. It wasn't the military. And so when I had the opportunity to become the first Iraq war veteran elected to Congress, And I went to my, brothers and sisters in Congress and said, hey, we kicked out over 13,000 troops. And I know you're going to say, well, we're in the middle of a war, we can't do anything. I'm like, we desegregated the military during the middle of the Korean War when we had half the country segregated. We were ahead of social change. We democratized higher education after World War II. We've done these things in the middle of a war before. We absolutely, positively do not need to be kicking out 3 to 4 great American warriors right now, every day, just because of who they love. And I'm like, if there's misconduct, it doesn't matter if they're gay or straight. We have regulations on the UCMJ, et cetera. We'll throw them out if there's misconduct. But just because of who they love, it's wrong. It's costing the taxpayers billions of dollars. So I need you in this fight. And we got folks in the House of Representatives and then eventually the Senate to do the right thing. And of course, President Obama, who talked about it in his first State of the Union address, signed a law, and we need history. And we put this country back on the right track in the arc of justice.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
I want to say that in preparation for this, I finally picked up your book, read it in its entirety, and I have to say I'm kicking myself for not reading it before I took your class. Because it generated like 100 questions, if not more, topics of conversation that I want to dig into. Obviously, in an effort to keep this, 30 minutes or less, I'm going to narrow it down to just a few. But the first thing I wanted to ask was, just reading about your first campaign. Seemed like every step of the way, it was like a knife fight, like from the primary to the general, getting people to back you, having people tell you, hey, maybe you're not the right guy at this time, and you pushing through all that. One was kind of like, I kind of got a gist for why your motivation for continuing to push on, because that was explained very well in your book. But like once you were successful and you show up and you're talking to all your colleagues on the Hill, like, were you ever comparing notes with these guys and girls and saying, what you guys went through didn't sound quite as difficult as what I had to go through to get to this position? Or is it generally like, does everyone have to deal with that many, push through that many difficulties to get to where you were?
You got to remember especially in the U.S. House of Representatives, there's 435 members in the House, and there's only about 35 traditional like swing districts, which I, represented in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and was now the Pennsylvania 1st District. But no, I let people know, like, what was at stake and how we won by 0.6%. We did compare notes. I try not to, bellyache when my roommate was Tim Walls, who was a command sergeant major in the Army. And our first day in Congress, they kind of pulled us in and said, all right, Tim, for the next, 3 months, you got to raise $65,000. And I had a separate meeting. They're like, hey, Patrick, in the first 3 months, you got to raise $250,000. And he was bellyaching about raising $65,000. Like, hey, dude, like, I got to raise whatever. But, it's the reality of campaigns. I mean, there's 220 media markets in the country, and I was in the 4th most expensive, which is Philadelphia. He was in Minnesota. It was a lot cheaper. And so he had to raise less money. So, we joked about that. And then, we really did have, our brothers and sisters who were the clout of our country, both Democrats, Republicans. We did have a bond. We did have a camaraderie. We do support each other, even today. And so I think that's incredibly important. You try not to, make it sound like you had the hardest, I had to walk barefoot both ways, uphill, both ways up to and from school. We all heard those kind of stories, but, I do tell the next generation, hey, if you want to be great, you got to embrace the suck. There's a lot of tough parts of this thing. If it was easy, everybody would do it. It's incredibly hard. I went for, a federal seat in the U.S. Congress right away, but I do counsel people, hey, I got super lucky. And, did I create some of my own luck? Yeah, but I was thinking about political public service, for over a decade before I actually pulled the trigger and did it. And if it's something that you really, truly want to do and believe in, you got to start small, and you have to have that snowball effect of success after success to really get after it.
Just to follow up, is it really still like someone who's looking to run today is what they're going to hear if they're an unknown? Like, okay, how much money can you raise? Is it going to come down to that for most people? Is that still because I know that kind of resonated with me in your book where, like, I forget who said it to you, but they said, come back and talk to me once you've raised $250,000.
It's someone. I mean, listen. The reality of it is like people look at the national. Oh, if I get the nomination, the national party's going to support me. No, they're going to support. Everybody wants to win. They're going to support winners. They can't support everybody. So we have the law of war principle of economy of force. We don't have unlimited bullets and bombs. You have to make them all count. And that dated back to the Revolutionary War where we said, "Do not fire until you see the white of their eyes." Right. So you got to understand, and people think that. Either party is like this big, the Battlestar Galactica or, this empire of unlimited funds. They're not. And, you got to work within the system. But also, it's not all about how wealthy you are because you raise the money. I was one of the poorest members of Congress. And I'm not uber wealthy right now, but I'm doing a lot better than I was 15 years ago when I was first getting into this. But I will tell you that, I tell people that unless you're independently wealthy, which there's a lot of members that are, let's be honest, most fresh members, I think the average age is 58. Most are, frankly, independently wealthy. I happen to still be paying my college loans off, right? So to me, what I tell people is, you gotta, unless you already have name ID, you gotta get after it. And you can't, especially at the federal level, you cannot door knock your way to wins. I don't care how great you are, and you can't press conference your way to wins. The press is going to follow you that much. You got to be able to put all three components of a campaign. I laid it out in my book, Taking the Hill. It is finance, it's communication, and it's field. How many votes do you need? How are you going to do it? And so I would say, whatever you could do to understand how to win these things and then set up a plan. You plan your work and then you work your plan. And yes, everyone has a plan until the punches are starting to, come, but you got to study other people's races. You got to study history, what happens and how they criticizing other folks. Where does that leave you in your own SWOT analysis? Those type of things. I'm passionate because I genuinely care about veterans serving in office. We had the least amount of veterans serving right now in the 21st century. Since before, World War II. And that's wrong. And we need these folks to go in, these guys and gals, to get to Congress, to put our country first, to do what's right, not just for our brother and sister veterans, but what's right for America.
Yeah, and I was actually going to follow up on that. I'm happy that you brought that up because the numbers have been declining. One, I want to know, what do you see as being part of the reason why? And two, what does the service member with the experience of being in the service bring to the political arena?
Well, the two of the biggest agencies in the federal government are actually Department of Defense and the VA. And that between those two, of a $4 trillion budget, that's $1 trillion right there. So that's over 25% of the federal budget goes just flat out to Department of Defense and the VA. So to have that firsthand experience of being, a military professional, being a veteran, being a military family member, I think that's incredibly important. And that's experience that you just can't read about in an academic textbook. You have to live, breathe it, and live by that code. In the Army, we call it, the 7 Army values. And those 7 Army values is how you have to live your life, whether the camera's on or not, because, character is how you are when nobody's looking. And so your campaign team will see that, your donors will see it, and you have to be willing to have that, that selfless service, that what I talked about earlier, that servant's heart, to genuinely want to serve and help others, help your team, and to win every day.
And that kind of feeds into my next question. It's you've been a part of some pretty, I would say, historic organizations, and obviously West Point jumps out. You were a law professor there. I think the youngest law professor to this day to serve as a professor at West Point. And obviously the 82nd Airborne in Iraq, organizations where you get people from all walks of life that show up, and through the experience of interacting in those organizations, in that culture, they become better people because of the values you just described. Because it kind of rubs off on them, right? So it's like it creates people who are more in line with the values that we aspire to as a country. My question is what's the culture like in DC? So like you show up at DC, like what are the values that are kind of prevalent in that sort of environment. And maybe it's different between each party, but not having any experience there, my theory is that it's not too similar to say what the values are at West Point. It's probably a little different. And I'm just wondering if you have the bright-eyed idealist showing up and then getting beat down because there is a different culture that maybe that culture rubs off on them rather than the reverse, where like you have someone who's showing up to West Point and the West Point culture rubbing off on them in a positive way.
You both know we live by a code in the military, and we don't throw around things like duty, honor, country lightly, and we live it every day. And we have an ethic that we leave no one behind, and you put the team first. But I will say that there is in Congress there is a different culture, right? I mean, most of those folks, have started out as city councilmen or state representatives or assemblymen, and went on to be state senator, and then this is their the pinnacle of their career, being a member of the U.S. Congress, which is an honorable profession. Which there's more folks that play professional sports in America that than actually serve in the Congress of the United States. So all those things taken into account, many of them will do anything they can to stay there, including not display political courage and not vote the right way, even though there's a problem. And a lot of folks they'll point, well, there's something wrong with this. And frankly, they let the perfect be the enemy of the good. But too often in our country, perfection is the enemy of progress. And you got to continue to move the ball forward. Even with the historic, repeal of the National Hotel, was the Murphy Amendment that passed that repealed the National Hotel. That wasn't perfect. A lot of folks don't know the repeal of the National Hotel was silent on transgender service members. I fought, for transgender service members when I ran the Army with then General Milley. I testified. We changed the Army policy. We let transgender Americans openly serve in our military, right? So, but I could not get that done in Congress. That would have made the repeal of the National Hotel fail. We would never have gotten marriage equality in America, right? So we took the 90% solution, and then later on, because there wasn't frankly, there wasn't a law against transgender service members serving, then I was able to do it via an executive order, via Army regulation, where we let them, let transgender Americans serve. So again, now people will say, geez, you passed the repeal of the National Hotel in 2010. Murphy didn't run the Army to change the transgender policy until 2016. That's 6 years. I got it, but I was in Congress at that point, right? I mean, because elections have consequences, policies have consequences. I could have sat on my hands and said, nope, Mr. President Obama, I'm not going to support raising the minimum wage. No, Mr. President, I'm not going to support the Affordable Health Care Act or Obamacare, even though it's the number one cause of bankruptcy in America, even though, there was, tens of millions of Americans that didn't have access to health insurance. I couldn't have supported the repeal of the National Hotel because, the Catholic Church, my local newspaper, was against it. But I wasn't there to get reelected every 2 years. I was there to make a difference for our country. I was there to move the ball forward. I was there to give people a tiny ripple of hope that things in America were getting better, that there was someone like Patrick Murphy that was going to fight for them and our values to make it better so they could serve openly, so they don't have to hide who they were, so they could do what was right to protect our families here at home when there's folks overseas who are still trying to do harm to our families here.
You brought up your time as Secretary of the Army, and I was curious because we keep bringing up, and don't ask, don't tell, you were acting secretary for Eric Fanning, who is openly gay and the first, openly gay secretary of any of the branches, which is just astonishing. And I just was curious if you can share with us maybe a story or anecdote from your time as Secretary of the Army and anything that you take away or you took away from that incredible experience.
Yeah, well, first off, Eric Fanning, Secretary Fanning, is a great American, and he's done a great job with AIA. And he has become a friend. And let me be very clear. He was confirmed. He was the Secretary of the Army. I was only the acting Secretary of the Army. I was his number two. And I was the acting number one until he was able to, get confirmed by the U.S. Senate. So we had a great partnership. And again, the partner also with then, Chief of Staff of the Army, General Mark Milley, is now the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and General McConville is now the Chief of Staff of the Army, et cetera. And we had, it's just incredible teammates. But I will tell you, it was a defining moment in our country's history. We were still wrapping up combat operations in Iraq, and we were, putting forces in places like Raqqa, Syria, and we still had troops in Afghanistan, that I visited, that I spent, Thanksgiving with, and those kind of experiences are incredibly important. But I will tell you that I think Secretary Fanning and I brought, with the leadership team at General Milley and the Sergeant Major of the Army, Dan Daly, we brought a different vibe, a different leadership style. We were out front and in front of folks, and we let people know, hey, if you want to join America's varsity team, join the U.S. Army. So we hit our recruitment goals for the first time in 5 years. We got 132,000 young Americans, Gen Zers, that joined our team that year in 2016. We had not hit it in 5 years. We haven't actually hit it since. So those type of initiatives made a difference, not just within those Americans that joined our team, but also made our team better moving forward. That was more representative of the America that we're representing. The fact that we had the most historic graduating class at West Point, that we increased minority participation to go to West Point over 50%. Those are the things that we're very, very proud of. The fact that we opened up, all the military occupational specialties, basically the jobs, I'll try not to use the mnemonics, every job was open to including women, including Ranger School. And having a historic class of women graduate from Ranger School, and now to see their careers continue to do great, and see women now serve in special operations and at every level of government, it's just phenomenal.
So the recent Senate election in Pennsylvania, at any point were you considering running?
I considered it, of course. I was asked to consider it by very powerful people, and at that time, to be honest with you, it just didn't feel right. I had just gone through a divorce. It was a very pleasant, as pleasant as could be, like a divorce. It just didn't feel right. My kids are young. My daughter just became a sophomore in high school, and my son's in 7th grade. But I'm a very active dad. I was at their basketball games this weekend, their volleyball practices. I only get one chance to be dad, and my daughter will be in college in basically 2 years, and my son about 5 years from now. So I have to make sure that, I'm there for them to make a difference. And once they get to college, whatever, then it's game on. And then I could go and serve in a political campaign and put myself out there. Maybe before, who knows? But, I will say that I do believe in political public service. And I believe in great Americans, and I support great Americans. It doesn't have to be, my name all the time either. I really worked my ass off for Josh Shapiro, who's a great governor-elect of Pennsylvania. I worked my ass off for Wes Moore, who served the 82nd Airborne Division. He's going to be a great governor of Maryland. I held a rally for the Veterans for Fetterman, for John Fetterman, who's our new U.S. Senator, who hasn't been sworn in yet. But, I work my ass off for other people because I'm a selfless servant, because it's not about Patrick Murphy. It's about the country and getting leaders like Christy Wilhelm, a congresswoman from Chester County, Pennsylvania, and Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey. These are great veterans and members of Congress who are changing the world for the better. I believe in them, and I have their back, and I support them and stand shoulder to shoulder with all of them.
Pennsylvania has a special place in my heart. I come from a long line of Pennsylvanians. I'm the first one to not grow up in Pennsylvania, but Western PA, Johnstown area, and I think that state is just growing in importance in terms of the national discussion. And I've been telling a lot of people this, but I think whoever wins Pennsylvania in 2024 is going to take the presidency. And the way we treated Ohio in the past is like the barometer for who wins the election. I think that has moved to Pennsylvania, and I think it's just neck and neck all the time. And so, yeah, watching it closely, I hope you do run in whatever capacity you think you can best serve in. I am conservative. Joey here is liberal Democrat, but you're someone I would vote for. So it's one of those things. So I'm excited about the future and watching how things play out.
Matt, one, I appreciate saying that, and I want to count you on that. So if I do run, you'd be ready to move back with Pennsylvania and get your family members on board. But I will tell you, I just on Friday night I was there working. I work a lot. I'm here at the corporate office right now, but I also work out of Barnes and Noble. I don't know why I love Barnes and Nobles. Right? It's like I'm fear of missing out. Right? There's people around me. I might have my earbuds in. I'm there working away, but like there's books, there's magazines, there's people, but there's frankly coffee and food. And so I'm there and I'm jamming out just like get my work done. But I was there on this past Friday night when the governor-elect Josh Pirro called me and said, "Hey, Patrick, could you chair my transition committee for public safety? It's incredibly important to me, and I really like you to be chairing it. Of course, it's not paid. It's basically like a 68-week gig." And I said, Governor-elect, I said, whatever you need, you're my guy. Like I'm there for you. And so I say that because just today it hit the papers. They've got it released on Saturday, so it's in the papers today. And a state senator, very Republican from Johnstown, reached out to me and said, "Hey, Patrick, congratulations. Whatever I can do to help, I'd love to be part, of, a new vision for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania." Now, again, I'm a Democrat. He's Republican. But he saw the character, the content of my character because we went to law school together. Because, when he said, "Hey, Patrick, I have a veterans event. Could you speak at my breakfast?" He doesn't really need Democratic supporters to win his reelections. He's a safe seat in the state Senate. But I drove through the night. I emceed a gala for Headstrong. It's a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. Got done about 10 o'clock. I drove 3 hours to Johnstown. I hit a deer in the middle of it. But I was still there at 6:30 in the morning to greet the folks coming in as prayer breakfast. There was 18 million reasons why I could have bagged it and said, "Hey, I'm sorry, I got to MC this black tie dinner the night before, and I just can't get there in time." But I made a commitment months earlier. I was going to back out of commitment. And again, I joke with him about it, but the fact that when the news comes forward, "Hey, Murphy's going to chair the transition team for Josh Pirro in public safety," he's the type of guy that he reaches out because he knows I put the country and I put our Commonwealth first. And that's what people want in their political leaders. They are tired of the far left and the far right getting all the press, getting all the TV spots, beating the crap out of each other. Because yes, it makes great TV. And yes, it's infotainment. But that's not what our democracy should be about. Our democracy should be about making this a more perfect union as it's laid out in our U.S. Constitution.
Well, Patrick, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I mean, it was so gracious and generous, for you to join us. You were the guest that I wanted, and we've had some really amazing conversations, but this is capping off a great day of great conversation. So thank you so much. 2 quick hits before I let you go. The first one being, do you still get any flack for being the only person to not vote to congratulate the New York Giants when they won the Super Bowl? And the second one, and maybe more important, is who was the better student, me or Matt?
Okay, a couple things. One, I still get grief. I still get grief about that Eagles vote. I call it the Eagles vote because I voted against the New York Giants when they won a Super Bowl. And I'm a former Eagles security guard, Veteran Stadium, 700 level. And that was tougher duty than my time in Baghdad, Iraq. And I lost 19 men in Iraq. So, it just gives you a feel for Veteran Stadium back in the 90s, especially as a 125-pound security guard. But yeah, hey, I voted my conscience, but I also voted, for the 700,000 people I represented. I only won my first race by 0.6%. I got to Congress. I voted against the Giants. I won my re-election by 55,000 votes by 15 points. I think it was like 8 points over President Obama because he's on my ticket at that time. So that was the right vote. But yeah, I still get some grief, especially from Giants fans. Secondly, hey, I love both you guys. But we all know under privacy laws, I can't say who was a better student and who got the better grade. But I think you're both great Americans. Listen, I appreciate you all having me on. And whether it's through this podcast, I know you're both going to make an incredible impact and continue to make an incredible impact for our country. And I'm always here to be there, a resource for you. As you know, you can always reach me on email, on cell phone, but also on social media at Patrick Murphy, PA. And for your listeners out there, if you tag me on LinkedIn, I accept LinkedIn requests. And obviously, I have a pretty active social media following. So, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, it's all at Patrick Murphy PA. But I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate you having me on to talk about things I'm passionate about, and that's our country, that's our Constitution, and that's our brothers and sisters in the military. Because I do believe that we're not victims, that we are civic assets to this nation. I'm a big believer in PTG, post-traumatic growth. If it wasn't for my time in combat, I wouldn't have been a member of Congress. I wouldn't have been, as you mentioned, the youngest professor at West Point at age 27. The Army changed my life. I mean, I had a gun pulled on me 3 times before I turned 18. And for me to go from full-time community college student to be within 10 years being a professor at West Point, a lawyer, and then to leave there to go to combat twice and then be a member of Congress and then eventually run the Army and the Pentagon. Like, I've been so blessed by this country. They've opened up so many doors, and I hope to continue to be able to serve to make it better and to help families and help individual people so they can go and live their dream and help make this country even better. So thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it. And if I could ever be helpful, you all let me know.
Will do. Thank you. All right. Have a great night. Thank you. Bye.